Okay, welcome back to the second lecture. If you remember, in the first one, we got an introduction to the Baire category theorem in the context of the real numbers. Let's quickly recall what it is. It says that if you have a countable collection of open and dense subsets of the real numbers, right? So here they are the UNs, right, with n going as 1, 2, 3. And suppose you intersect them, then there must be at least one common element. The intersection of all the UNs cannot be empty. And we did one application of this. We saw that the rational numbers cannot be expressed as an intersection of open sets. You can fill them up with closed sets, of course, countably many, since they are made out of countably many individual rational numbers. But so you can build up to them like that through closed sets, but you can't start on top and shrink down to them as intersection of open sets. And we will see a further application of this interesting fact. So it will therefore be an indirect application of the Baire category theorem. To set this up, why should, I'll raise a certain question, but why should we care about this question? So let us start with a very basic thing. As I had said last time, we will be talking about Riemann integration. So consider the problem of a bounded function on some closed interval. Let's take the closed interval 0, 1. Okay. And the question is whether f is Riemann integrable or not. Of course, it depends on the properties that f has. Let's set up a scale and look at functions with various degrees of niceness. Okay. So for example, suppose there was a function which was continuous at every point. Right? That's sort of the best possible situation. Suppose it's continuous at every point of this interval 0 to 1. Well, we know that such functions are Riemann integrable. That's one of the first theorems that you do. First theorem that one does is that monotonic functions are Riemann integrable. And then the other one is that continuous functions are Riemann integrable. There could be a few discontinuities. That doesn't matter too much. So, further down the spectrum, you could have functions with finitely many discontinuities. These also always turn out to be Riemann integrable. Even ones with infinitely many discontinuities could be Riemann integrable. In fact, again, there's a general result, not hard to prove, that if you had, say, countably many discontinuities, let's keep it simple. With only one limit point, for example, suppose the function was discontinuous at 1/2, 1/3, 1/4, and so on, at all of these, but it was continuous in the intervals between these unit fractions. Okay, then it would have infinitely many discontinuities. There would be only one limit point, right? 0. And in this situation, such a function would in fact be Riemann integrable. And that's easy to show because there's only one troublesome point. So you take partitions which are thin near that point and you get very little contribution from it. Okay. So these also turn out to be always Riemann integrable. Now, of course, you do have functions which are not Riemann integrable. Let me mark this in mark in orange a different way of saying. Here so far we have been looking at a certain class of function and saying that every such function is nice, is integrable. From the other end, I will instead give you examples that if a function is not nice in some sense, then perhaps it won't be Riemann integrable. Here is at least one example of such a function. I am at this point not claiming that all functions which are of that type will fail to be Riemann integrable. Sometimes one can say that, but I don't want to get into that today. Okay. So from the other end, of course, what is the most common function that we know about, which is not Riemann integrable, the Dirichlet function. Right? The function which takes one value on rationals and another value on irrationals. For example, 0 on rationals and 1 on irrationals within this interval 0, 1. So we know that this function is not integrable, right? And this function, of course, is not a very nice function. This one is discontinuous at every point. You can see where we are going. It looks like if you don't have too many discontinuities or you have many, but somehow they are distributed in a nice enough way, then you might be lucky and the function may still be integrable. If on the other hand you have too many discontinuities, of course very extreme case when it's discontinuous at every point, then you may perhaps fail to have an integrable function. Okay. There's an interesting example that fits between these two extremes. Let me put it here. And this is called Thomae's function. Let me talk about it briefly. Okay, how is it defined? Let's talk about that first. Okay, so everything is on the interval 0, 1. In that interval, if I'm at an irrational number, okay, then I just take the function to be 0. On the other hand, if the function is a rational number, right, what does that mean? So maybe we can give x a special form. Right? We can say it's p by q. 0 I will treat separately, so I'll come to that at the end. Let's say it's a rational number of the form p by q. I take p and q to be natural numbers, right? Since we are anyway dealing with positive rationals. And if there were any common factors, I cancel them. So I also assume that p and q are co-prime. This is right, the notation for saying that the GCD of p and q is 1. Okay, so it's of the form p by q. You take p and q both to be positive. If there are common factors, you remove them. Now p and q are uniquely fixed for this rational number. So let the function value be 1 upon q. Okay. Now 0 has been left out of all this. So let's just give some value at 0 also. Okay. Or we can wait and see what value we want to give at 0. But let's just note we haven't given, right? 0 doesn't fit in the first line and it doesn't fit in the second line either. Okay. So I will just make space for it. Okay. And we will see what to put. It's just one point. It doesn't really matter what we do here. Okay. Now the point is that take any point between 0 and 1. And you can either approach it through rationals or you can think like this. Let's see what happens when we approach it through rational numbers and let's see what happens when we approach it through irrational numbers. Now, if you approach it through irrational numbers, then you'll only see the 0 function value and the limit along such an approach will be 0. What happens if you approach along rational numbers? Then, of course, the individual function values that you are seeing are non-zero values. But what happens, right? How do you approach a number using rational numbers p and q? To get closer and closer to a certain number, to make these fine adjustments, you'll have to keep increasing your denominator. Right? If you fix the denominator you're working with, you only have finitely many options. You can only get that close to that number. To get closer and closer and closer, you must work with higher and higher denominators. That means that this 1 by q shrinks, right? And so, if you want to approach a number through a sequence of rationals, the function values that you are seeing, the 1 by q's must go to 0. Okay, so doesn't matter how you approach finally, along rationals or irrationals, the limit of this Thomas function at any point in this interval 0 to 1 is going to be 0. Okay. Well, now about continuity, right? Where does this limit match the function value? It matches at the irrationals. So therefore, t is continuous on the irrationals and t is discontinuous on the rationals. At every rational, the function value is non-zero, doesn't match the limit, so you have discontinuity. Okay, in fact, now we know what we should do with x equals 0. So that things fit this pattern. Since 0 is a rational number, I must put some non-zero value here, right? So that this pattern, this simple pattern fits. So let's just put 1 here. Okay. Okay, let's come back to our spectrum. So here's an interesting function, much more extreme than the others, right? With lots of discontinuities, discontinuous at every rational number. So discontinuous at a set which is dense. Although, as we saw in the last lecture, there is a sense in which the rationals are, though dense, are still a bit sparse. When you can, right, you can cover them with open intervals in a way that the total length of those intervals is small. But still, here I have to put a tick. Okay, fine. So we see all these kinds of continuities and discontinuities, different levels. They have some implications for integration. Well, what's true is that Thomas function turns out to be Riemann integrable. Okay, that's a bit more work. We won't get into that. This is just background for the question that we want to come up with. Now, there's a very natural question that comes up here. We have a function that is continuous on the irrationals, discontinuous on the rationals. This function turned out to be Riemann integrable. The natural question is, what if a function was the opposite, right? What would happen if f was continuous on the rationals and discontinuous on the irrationals? Okay. Well, we are going to involve the Bayer category theorem in answering this question, of course. So the first thing I need to do is I need to state Bayer category theorem in the context of this interval 0, 1 rather than in the context of the whole real line. Now, I have not proved the Bayer category theorem for reals. I just said what it was and we started using it. So I'm still not going to prove it, but I'm going to say, okay, I stated something as to be assumed for now. And let us also assume something similar in a similar setting. And in the next lecture, I'll give a proof which will cover all these cases, which will cover the real line, which will cover intervals like 0, 1, etc., and other spaces also. So eventually we will do a proof of the Bayer category theorem, which will be general and will cover all the particular cases where we are saying what it is. So here's a fact, okay, let's just take it like that, that the Bayer category theorem holds over every closed interval AB. First take A less than B so that you have something interesting to look at more than just one point. What does this mean? This means that take a closed interval AB and take open subsets, right, which are dense in it. Take countably many. And then if you intersect them, the intersection is going to be non-empty. Just the same theorem as it was for R, except wherever it said R, we are saying closed interval AB. It's actually, I mean, it should be fairly obvious why this must work. As I said, there are one or two small details to be justified, but it's nothing major. The thing is that if you had an interval AB, then you could simply repeat the same interval, right? Take the same length and keep repeating this, and this will cover the real line. And if you had some un here, which was open and dense somehow, then you could take copies of that un. Okay, let me color the copies. So this is a copy of un in the next interval, and this is another copy, and this is another copy, and so forth. And by combining these, you could create sets which are open and dense over entire R. And in each interval, what will happen is whatever was happening in AB. So if the intersection was empty in AB, it would be empty in each other interval and therefore overall empty. And so that is why essentially if the Bayer category theorem is going to hold for all of R, then by chopping R into countably many intervals, you see that it must hold in each interval as well. Anyway, that's the intuitive idea, and we will formally, as I said, do a proof which covers all these cases in any way. Okay. So in particular, the Bayer category theorem holds over the closed interval 0 to 1. Now let's just ask, right? Let's just ask what is the definition of continuity at a point, right? That's a starting point, and just see the implications of it. That's all we'll have to do to answer this question, right? Uh, what is the question? The question was about integrability of a function which is uh, continuous exactly on the rationals within the closed interval 0 to 1. But the before that, is there such a function at all? After all, Thomas function was a concrete example. Is there such a function? If I had a concrete such function, I could maybe look at it. So let us just start thinking about what is involved and see either we come up with some such function and its properties, maybe we find there isn't such a function, let's see what happens. Okay, so take any function, right? Of course, bounded. This doesn't matter much, but for integrability, you'd want it to be bounded. So let's just put it in. Who knows, okay, whether it will be useful or not. Okay, what's next? What's next is you say, okay, what does it mean for f to be continuous at some point A? Let me just write the definition that for all epsilon, there is a delta such that, you write it here, uh, if x minus a is less than delta, then fx minus fa is less than epsilon. Yeah. Of course, the x has to be from the interval from 0, 1. Okay. But generally, one doesn't bother to write. Okay, so that's the condition for continuity at A. Now remember, by the Archimedean property of the real line, any real number epsilon, once it's positive, you can always find a unit fraction 1 by n, which is less than epsilon. And a delta which works for 1 by n will also work for epsilon. And therefore, I need not actually look at all positive real numbers. I can just concentrate on the unit fractions, right? So I can say, well, okay, all this, if and only if, let me color the if and only if so that it's clear, what the blocks are. Okay, if and only if this, and then if and only if the next thing. If and only if for all epsilon positive. Now, when you say there is a delta, right, and you say then mod x is within delta of A, what you're really setting up, you're setting up an open interval centered at A and saying that things there will be mapped within epsilon of f of A, of f of A. Okay. So instead of delta, let me just move to that language for every, sorry, I said I was going to move to 1 by n and I didn't. Let's do that. For every n natural number, right, this will give me the 1 by n. There is an open interval. Okay, let's call it I. Containing A, I will write it like this, such that everything in this interval I, when I hit it with f, is within 1 by n of fa. Okay. Or I could even take 1 by 2n of fa. That's up to me how close I want it to be. Let's take 1 by 2n. Now, if the fx's are within 1 by 2n of fa, then they are within 1 by n of each other by the triangle inequality, right? You have 3 points. If each gap is less than 1 by 2n, then the total gap is less than 1 by n. Okay, so such that all these points of I are within 1 by n of each other, so the diameter of this set is less than 1 by n. Okay, so what we have seen is that if f is continuous at A, then around A you can find this interval I, so that f of I, all the points will be very close to each other within any 1 by n that you are concerned about. Now, the way to use the Bayer category theorem is that whatever criteria you have, okay, try to arrange them in various levels. And then either your final set will come by taking the union of what is happening through all these levels or their intersection. And then you are in a situation where the Bayer category theorem can be applied. So how do I create levels out of this? I must use this n since I have to create countably many levels. Okay. So what we will do is basically we are concerned with how close these points can get to each other. So let us do it using that. Now based on this 1 by n, we will define certain sets un like this. We'll take the union over all such nice intervals like these i's. I is an open interval in 0, 1. And when I say that, then even things which are say like open at half and closed at 1, I will accept as open intervals within the context of working within 0 to 1. Okay. And I mean, the main thing that when you look at f of I, all those points are within 1 by n of each other. Okay. Now, what happens if f is continuous at some point a? What is its relationship with these sets un? So let's suppose f is continuous at a. Okay. Now, since it is now take any n, since f is continuous at a, there will be such an interval I. That interval I will then be present inside this un, and therefore a itself will be in un. So a would belong to un, and this would happen for every n, every natural number n. The converse is also true. If a belongs to un, some un, then there will be such an I, and so the I that you wanted for continuity would have been found, right? So this goes the other way as well. That means that the points where f is continuous are exactly the points which are in all the UNs. That is exactly the intersection of all the UNs. So if I look at the points where f is continuous, that set, then that is in fact the intersection of all the UNs. And therefore, this set can't be the rational numbers, right? It's not possible that f is continuous exactly on the rational numbers of 0, 1. Because the Bayer category theorem told us that this can't be an intersection of open sets, whereas the places where f is continuous, that is an intersection of open sets. So the two can't match, right? So therefore, so in fact, that natural question that you have Thomas function, very interesting function, which is continuous exactly at the irrationals. What would happen if you had a function which was continuous exactly on the rationals? Well, okay, turns out you can't have such a function. So there is no function Okay, so that's an interesting thing. So some level of weirdness just can't happen. That's nice. Okay, now we are again almost at the end of this portion. So I will again close by sort of just saying a little bit about what lies ahead and give you something to think about in between this and the next lecture. So first, let me tell you about the next question that I want us to think about. Okay. Here is the situation. Take a continuous function. Right? It's all everything is over real numbers. Now, one knows from the fundamental theorem of calculus, if you write such a continuous function would have an antiderivative. You can find a function f1 so that when you differentiate it, you get f. Now this is differentiable, so it's continuous, so you can repeat the process with that. You can find an f2 which gives f1 and etc etc, right? And this will go on forever. Yeah. So there's an infinite sequence like this. Now these functions keep changing. Suppose one of them actually became 0. Then of course if say fk was 0 and the next one was obtained by differentiating, that would be 0, the next would be 0. They would all be 0 beyond this, and this f itself would have to be 0, right? So if any of these fk's was 0 at every point of some interval, then my function f would also be 0 at all points of that interval. Okay. Now the question we ask is fine. So right now we are saying if there is a k such that fkx is 0 for all x, then of course my original function f must be the 0 function also. But what if it was a more mixed situation? Suppose that I looked at some x and I found that f3x was 0. I looked at another x and I found that f3x was not 0 but f5x was 0. Right? So there's a bit like continuity and uniform continuity. What if for every x there was a k so that that function was 0 at that x, but this varied. So you would not be able to apply the argument that I just applied, right? So the question is, what if for every x, right? Let's say this is some interval I where we are discussing things. There is a k which depends on x such that when you look at the function in this sequence corresponding to this k, it turns out to be 0. Now it's not very clear. At some places first derivative is 0, at some places second derivative is 0, but maybe first derivative is not 0. At some places third derivative is 0. It's not very clear if this should lead to any information about f. But this is the problem we want to think about. Okay, what if what if the information was sort of scattered in this way? Would we still be able to say something about f? Okay. Okay, so that's another application that we will do. In order to do this, it will be convenient to recast the Bayer category theorem in another format. We'll do that. And once we are done with this example, then we will start thinking more generally and we'll say, okay, it's time that we actually prove the Bayer category theorem. And then if you're going to prove it, then you should prove it in enough generality so that you don't have to do it over and over again. So we'll set up that generality and we will prove the Bayer category theorem in that. And then that will open up new applications and uses of the theorem, which we will take up subsequently in the remaining time. Okay. Okay, let me stop here. All right. So thank you for listening so far. I hope that this is of some interest. Things are building up, so more and more interesting things should happen in the remaining time.